So that was a good example.
But we also have
Yeah, we also
not
had,
so well succeeded, right? Which is part
I
of
think
R&D.
that's
That's an
part
important
of the business. I mean, if
Yeah.
we talk about research and development, there's a lot of failures there, and we learn a lot from failures. Well, some argue that we learn more from failures than from successes. I think we did learn, but I mean, we did learn from failure.
"10 Years Forward, Research and Development."
Hello and welcome to 10 Years Forward. I'm Miguel Marques, and today I'll be joined by João Vieira da Silva to talk about the most impactful R&D projects of the past decade and how they're shaping the energy system of the future. João, good to have you here.
Thank you, Miguel.
So, João, looking back over the past decade, which R&D projects stand out as the most successful? So, which come to mind when you think of the success of an R&D project that we've had throughout the years?
So I'd say that it is difficult to define which is the most impactful. We have a couple of ones, but if you are asking me, I would say one project that it is called X-Flex Hydro. It focuses on our hydro assets. As you know, on EDP we have a large portfolio of hydro assets. And why I am choosing this project? I am choosing this project because at the end of the project, in fact, this project closed last year. We were able to, let's say, deliver directly results to our business, in this case to the RGA platform. And what was these results? Basically, nowadays, we are able to extend the operating range of our hydro assets, which means that we can produce more power, we have more flexibility to define which level of power we can put into the grid. And this, for our market player that is selling and buying energy on the market, it's really important. But I would define this because of the direct impact that it has into the business. So R&D allowing business to move forward.
Yeah, I've been with the company for a few years as well, and I think, as you said, 70 projects, that's a lot of projects. That's a lot of things going well, some going well, others not going as well. I have examples of both, by the way. So I think a good example there is a project that we had really early on in the R&D Center, which was a project called Sensible, which focused on storage. And I think, now we talk about storage, so 10 years on, storage is everywhere. Right, 10 years ago, that was not the case. And we had this project in which we were installing storage in people's houses, storage in the grid, and we were doing islanding, so meaning operating parts of the grid on its own, so not connected to the rest of the grid. So that was quite innovative, quite a pioneering project. And that was successful in that sense that, we were spearheading this new technology, testing it out, and that was pretty novel thing to do. So that was a good example.
But we also have so well succeeded, right? Which is part of R&D. That's an important
part of the business. If we talk about research and development, there's a lot of failures there, and we learn a lot from failures. Well, some argue that we learn more from failures than from successes. I think we did learn, but we did learn from failure. We'll learn it the hard way, but we did learn. We had a project on offshore wind. So installing, the plan was to install a wind turbine at sea off the coast of Portugal. And it was a hybrid solution. Hybrid in the sense that we were using both concrete as a basis, both concrete and steel. And at the time, there was a huge discussion about what should we install offshore. Is it concrete? What is it steel? What type of material withstands the most when placed offshore? And we had this hybrid solution. But as we started the project and as it progressed, the price of steel went through the roof, and so it lost a lot of its technical merit that it had initially, and so we decided to cut it off, and I think we cut it off quite cleanly, in the sense that there was no huge impact. We ended up not installing anything offshore. The thing with this project is that you either have a big project installed at sea, or you have no project at all. So so failure was very obvious in the sense that you looked at it and there was nothing installed offshore. But we learned from it, as I said. We learned a lot from those mistakes. We understood that we had to be more smarter about the way we did things, maybe a bit less, a bit less, continuing to do some to accumulate risk, but have it in a more controlled manner and smarter fashion, I would say. But
in these projects, at the end we are funded by the European Commission, right? So maybe I would ask you to understand how the Commission, handles this kind of situations, in the sense if it is also part of the business for them to understand that sometimes things go wrong, and these cases can happen, and life continues. This is how the Commission also handles this?
Yeah, incredibly cooperative. I would say, the relationship with them throughout these 10 years has been very good. I mean, the way we handled the Endeavour project was also, highlighted by them, in the sense that we did, stop loss, saying we're not going to spend anymore. We're not going to continue to invest on a technology that's now proven to be not as impactful and not as relevant as it seemed at first. So we failed with them. So we got them engaged, and we got them to understand that we were stopping the project for one reason, for a specific reason, not because we didn't want to go ahead with it. I think that's what you learn. You learn from these experiences, I guess.
And that's really important, and it is what gave us also confidence to continue, right? Because if our funding authority was not able to handle this, also the way how it is our business model, it would be a problem to us. So it is good to have, a coherent and cooperative entity that is funding our projects.
That's crucial. I think that's part of the success as well.
Yeah.
Speaking of success, I think you mentioned earlier that Xflex Hydro was a success, a clear success, because impact in the business was there. Yeah. Is that how you measure success?
Yeah. For sure, we cannot only measure like that, because we need to be true about that. We need to see the truth there is. R&D is R&D, which means that sometimes we are going to fail. Sometimes we are not going to be ready to put something into business. So we will need new funding rounds to ensure that the product that we are developing can indeed enter on the business. So we cannot only measure success for this metric. It's an important metric, but not the only one. And I can give
measure it. Yeah. No, my question is, when can you measure the success?
Yeah.
Because if the project ends today, can you tomorrow already assess, is it a success or not?
Most of the times, no.
Yeah.
Most of the
times, I think that's also important.
Imagine one case that I can give you that really goes in line with what you were saying, is that sometimes we have, for example, on our projects, pilot projects, where we are showing to our regulators, to our transmission system operator, that a specific new type, for example, of renewable can provide what we call the system services. So services that allow
to support the grid.
Exactly, to support the grid and ensure that, for example, we don't have the blackouts. Okay, so we use these projects to show them, look, this is possible. The regulation needs to be changed, but changing regulation takes time. So when you end the project, you are proving that, but then probably that will need like
you're
committees.
Pushing the boundaries as well, but the boundaries don't move instantly, right?
Exactly. Specifically on this case, then they need, to make also their own studies, understand if we were, let's say, reliable on the exercise that we have done.
But you've helped
exactly
change the needle.
Exactly. Yeah. We changed the mindset. That's the point. Okay. So I think this is a way of how we can measure success. But sometimes we also have other ways. Imagine that on this kind of projects, we can, for example, develop tools that can serve our business. One of the things that EDP does is investment, or on storage or on renewables. And indeed, these projects also serve for us to develop this kind of tools that can understand if an investment will be reliable or not, profitable or not. And so, yes,
so it supports the business, right?
Supports the business.
It's also a means for us to develop a tool that then supports the business and that helps us have better investments, right?
Exactly.
Okay. I agree. I think, the one thing that comes to mind when I think about success is impact in the business. But again, impact isn't instant. You can't measure it right away. It takes its time. You cannot, we usually don't deliver a solution that's immediately integrated into the business. That's usually not the case. Xflex Hydro was the case indeed. So that was a great example of a quick win in a sense.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes it needs to take its time. I think one example, again, going back to the other project I mentioned, Project Sensible, it took its time for us to integrate storage into the system. Now we do have storage. Now we are deploying storage units across the globe. But I mean, it wasn't obvious, and it didn't came immediately after we ended the project, right?
Not... And for sure, the project, like others on the same topic, helped to pave the way, right?
Of course, yeah. Looking ahead, what projects would you say you're more excited about for the future? So what will be the R&D focus? I mean, there's a lot of different areas for us to do R&D in, a lot of different business platforms at EDP, right? So, but what would you like to focus on? What do you think are the most promising areas?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it's also an easy answer, at least for us at EDP. Because, one of the things that I think, let's say, characterizes our R&D is focus. Okay, so we are really aligned with what our business is doing, and the business plan and the priorities to our business are really well defined. So we have nowadays 4 platforms, one that focuses on renewables, one that focuses on the clients, one that focuses on the grid itself, and then we have another that it is the energy management, so the operation into the markets. So indeed, for us, it's clear that we have technical areas on our R&D team focusing on these 4 different topics. And indeed, we are, let's say, targeting innovations and research on all these different aspects, okay? I can give you, for example, an example for the global energy management, okay? It is one of the areas that in the next few years will be clearly impacted by AI, okay? To give you an example, 1 year ago or before, we were having, let's say, we were selling and buying energy on a time step of 1 hour, which means that our operators, our market operators...
You go to the market to buy or sell every hour.
Exactly, buy or sell every hour. And this was done by an operator, a person that it is deciding I should sell on the next hour X amount of energy, or I should buy it, okay? So we are now...
the world a year ago.
A year ago, before that. So now we are moving into the 15 minutes. So each 15 minutes we need to take these decisions. And the future will go more into real time. So this means that there is no time. There is no
for
time for a person to make these decisions. It's not possible. It's unrealistic. So indeed, AI will bring, a whole different way of making these decisions, will be automated. Naturally, we will need the human always to supervise these decisions, but the engine of AI will, look to multiple variables at the same time that that influence if we are going to earn more or less and take the decisions.
We compute the optimal solution, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so that's also a shift,
complete,
drastic shift. So let me challenge you a bit on that, because you said we're very focused. We have 4 platforms. We're very focused. We have our own focus areas, and we're looking at them. But R&D, as we said previously, R&D delivers it. It takes its time to mature and to come to full maturity, full fruition. How do you ensure that it's future-proof, in a sense that maybe you're now starting a project that'll have impact in say 10 years' time? How do you ensure that those projects that we're starting today, impact or hopefully impact, or you estimate that they will impact in 10 years? How do you make sure that that's the case? Because you have to have, forward-looking kind of mindset, right?
That's true. So first of all, we have several internal initiatives that, let's say, somehow try to track that. I would say that first of all, we have what we call our hunting zones. So these hunting zones...
focus areas, right?
Exactly. They are defined at the end of each year. We discuss with our businesses. So we go to the businesses, we have meetings with them, and we define, look, we are not here to do incremental innovation. So
not for tomorrow, but
not for tomorrow.
5 years, 10 years, 15 years.
So we want to discuss with you what you are already envisioning for the upcoming years. So I think these discussions, open discussions with the business, is what creates us those guiding lines. Once again, we are still R&D, so sometimes they will fail, those decisions. There is this risk, but at least the fact that we are cooperating directly in the business from the beginning gives us a certain degree of confidence that things will work well. Okay, I would say that is the first point that I would like to highlight. But then we also have another initiative that tries to track what the projects are doing. Okay, so this means that even when the projects are closed, we are still tracking the outcomes of that project, because sometimes we understand that there will be no direct impact, and if we cannot find a way to monitor this, probably things will be lost. So we still need, to still during some time after the project, the closure of the project, to keep understanding if things are changing.
What's changing.
If things change, we can, directly activate what has been done. So yeah, I think these two are important points on that front.
Okay, great. In your vision, what's the most mind-blowing thing that you hope will happen in the next 10 years in the energy sector?
I will also want to know yours after, but
you first.
Yeah, mine. I wouldn't call it mind-blowing, in the sense that most of the people already heard about it. Okay, one thing is to hear about it. Another thing is that this really happens. That it is to run an electrical system on full renewables. We hear on the news that Portugal run on full renewables 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 1 week, something like that, right? But running full renewables permanently, it's something that it is really challenging, because, and the story all of us know, renewables are variable. We cannot ensure that all the time they will be available to...
The wind will blow, that the sun will shine.
Exactly. But we have ways that are still... The technologies are there, but the deployment of those technologies are still growing. And I am talking about storage units. I am talking about demand side management, which means, for example, to be clear on this, means that myself at home can answer to a request from a system operator to change my load profile for a different
hour. The customer
hour.
itself participate in that effort.
Exactly. Active participation to the support of the grid, okay, to accommodate this variability of renewables, okay. So all these layers associated with what we call flexibility, they will be needed to ensure that the system can run on full renewables. Renewables themselves will not allow that, but coupling with
all those components put together will allow that to happen.
It will allow, yes.
So you expect that for the next 10 years, that will at one point happen, permanently or in a permanent basis?
Or at least most of the time.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Not 100% of the time, but yeah. Okay. And I think the shift, or the drastic shift I expect to see in the next few years is having a lot of decarbonization from industry. So the shift towards electric, and so these companies are using gas boilers. They're producing their own heat through gas sources, to natural gas. There's a carbon footprint that's very obvious there. And I think this shift towards electrification of those consumptions, that will make a dramatic difference in our global carbon footprint. I think over the next 10 years, we'll see a lot of companies, a lot of factories. I'm talking about mostly heavy industries, but we'll see them turning into green steel factories, green textile factories, etc. And I think that will dramatically change the way we looked at the energy transition, decarbonization. Because in general, those I'm sure we'll already have those tools. It's a question of mindset. It's a question of price. So in some cases, the price is not there yet, and obviously you have low margins. You have to make sure that the price is as low as you can get it. But my sense, my vision on this is that the industry decarbonization will happen. It will make a huge difference in the way we are decarbonizing the energy industry and the industry and the globe in general. I think
And I think one important thing on that is that doesn't mean that the industries will run just on electrical energy.
No.
It
means, as you said previously.
Exactly. It means that some of the energy vectors that nowadays they already use, like heat, like hydrogen, they will be produced through a green way. where electricity can play a big role.
That'll be a significant difference, and I think that shift, I'm sure will happen in my lifetime. In the next 10 years, in 10 years' time, I'm sure we'll have that.
At least a big change on that front, for sure.
Sure about it. Thank you, João. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Miguel.
And thanks for joining us in this journey through 10 years of innovation and R&D at EDP's R&D Center. Stay tuned for more, and let's keep pushing the boundaries with us. Thank you.
10 years forward, research and development.